Since time immemorial, the mystery of the mark of the beast has enveloped the human imagination with a combination of curiosity and fear. It's as if there is a shadow over history, a shadow that hangs over humanity, fascinating and frightening at the same time. Many have heard whispers about the famous number 666, but few understand the true impact of this brand. There is, after all, something hidden and profound in this enigma that has crossed generations and persists as a forbidden theme, full of secrets and symbolism. Anyone who dares to face this story needs to prepare themselves for the revelations that are to come. Now click like, subscribe to the channel. It will only take a second, and you will help us. Why could a simple number cause so much uproar and unrest? This symbol seems to go beyond religious beliefs and resonates with even the most skeptical. Let us imagine what the Apostle John must have felt when recording his vision, writing to a humanity that was still unaware of the weight of his words. It's not just a curiosity of history. It is a mystery that pierces the soul and defies understanding. And now, faced with this reality shrouded in symbolism and fear, it is up to us to ask, have we already carried this mark without even realizing it? Over the centuries, countless interpretations of the mark of the beast have emerged. Some see it as a symbol, others take it as a real prophecy that is fulfilled every day. But the truth is that between fear and fascination, everyone wonders if this milestone is closer than they would like to believe. And, deep down, even those who doubt feel a slight uneasiness when thinking about the possibilities. Are we all being marked little by little? Or would this be just another legend, a piece of history's curiosity that time has transformed into myth? Now, the question that remains unanswered: are we on the verge of a revelation, or is the mark of the beast a fear manufactured by centuries of speculation? Let's explore this journey together, unraveling every detail, every symbol, and every theory surrounding this dark brand. Get ready to face the unknown, because what comes next could change your view of history and the reality we live in. The path is just beginning, and at the end, perhaps you will discover whether you already carry, consciously or not, the mark of the beast. The origin of the mark of the beast is an enigma that intertwines with the beginnings of Christianity and the revelatory visions of the Apostle John. He was in exile on the Isle of Patmos, where he received a series of apocalyptic revelations that became the basis of the dreaded book of Revelation. Imagine the impact of this vision in such a distant time, where any threat to the empire was a direct challenge to survival. In the midst of these visions, John contemplated grandiose images, monstrous figures, and a specific symbol that would be recorded in history: the brand. What did he see? A sign that would be given to man, a warning or a prophecy destined to echo to this day. The historical context of this brand reveals a world where symbols were used to control and divide. During the rule of the Roman Empire, it was common for emperors to use marks and inscriptions to identify their subjects, differentiating those who conformed to the government from those who were considered rebels. This environment of surveillance and imposition reinforces the idea that the mark of the beast could have a similar function: to identify and divide. For Christians at the time, this mark represented a sign of loyalty to what was considered unclean, a direct challenge to their loyalty to God. It's fascinating how something so distant still has such a profound impact. The word brand carried symbolic weight for the ancients. It was not just a visible symbol, but a statement of who you are and what you belong to. In several cultures, the brand symbolized belonging, possession, and obedience. For the public of John's time, receiving this mark meant something irreversible, a definitive choice between loyalty to the beast or loyalty to God. Thus, by mentioning this word, John not only brought to light a sign of identification, but a seal that would reveal the character and spiritual covenant of each person. Interestingly, many of these ideas resonate to this day, where symbols and brands still define and divide. It is intriguing to see how, over the centuries, this concept of brand has transformed and taken on new meanings. Was the mark seen by Zhuo just a way of referring to the political oppression of his time? Or was there something more? The curiosities of the story lead us to reflect on what he really wanted to convey. And so, we continue to understand how this symbol has unfolded over the centuries, leaving a trail of questions and interpretations. We are about to unveil the hidden meanings of a symbol that to this day affects the imagination and faith of many. The number 666 is, without a doubt, one of the most disturbing curiosities in history, an enigma that awakens fascination and fear in those who hear it. Since it was mentioned in the Apocalypse, this number has come to carry an immense symbolic load, gaining status as a synonym for something evil, dangerous. But does it represent just a symbol? Or is there a deeper purpose that few know about? This number did not arise by chance. He was hand-picked, in a context where each figure had a spiritual and cultural weight. And, perhaps, this is the point where myth and reality meet. For some scholars, the number 666 symbolizes imperfection. In the biblical context, the number 7 is often associated with perfection and the divine. Since 6 is a unit below 7, 3 times 6 represents a failed attempt to achieve this perfection. This interpretation leads us to understand the number as something that longs for the sacred but never manages to achieve it. He thus becomes a symbol of rebellion and disorder, a mark of those who move away from what is considered perfect. In our lives, this concept can lead us to reflect on false idols and illusions that seem close to the ideal, but that, deep down, never deliver what is promised. However, the analysis of the number 666 goes beyond numerical symbolism. In Jewish culture, numbers had deep meanings, being used to designate hidden messages and indirect references. There are those who believe that the number may have been a reference to Roman emperors, such as Nero, whose name, when transformed into Hebrew numerology, corresponds precisely to the value of 666. This intriguing calculation places the number in historical context and shows that, in addition to being a prophetic symbol, it may also have been a veiled criticism of the oppressive power of the time. A curiosity from history that shows us that the number has deep and very real roots. Over time, 666 gained new layers of meaning, becoming associated with the occult, dark forces, and even modern conspiracy theories. But do we really understand everything this number represents? Or has it been that, over the centuries, its essence has been obscured by extreme and sensationalist interpretations? Let's continue this exploration, and, who knows, find new perspectives on this disturbing brand, which still resonates with power in the collective imagination, and brings to light so many doubts about what it really means to carry a number so full of mystery. The figure of the beast in Revelation is one of the most intriguing and frightening symbols in Scripture. Who or what does she represent? For some, the beast is an evil spiritual entity, a dark presence that symbolizes evil at its core. Others interpret her as a personification of oppressive power, whether political or religious, a force that seeks to dominate and manipulate. Imagine an invisible force that, without us realizing it, tries to influence us at every step through the ideas, fashions, and values we adopt. Anyone who really knows the power of this entity knows how much it camouflages itself in the details of everyday life. The descriptions in the Apocalypse bring characteristics that seem like a monster out of a nightmare. Several heads, horns, and a terrifying appearance. But this image can also be interpreted as a metaphor for systems of power that feed on fear and worship. How many have not seen figures in history who seemed invincible, who position themselves above everything and everyone, and who, in some way, resemble this beast? Perhaps what John saw in his vision is a reflection of forces that are still at work in our world, in subtle but constant ways. There are those who say that the beast represents not only a specific power, but the world system itself, with all its temptations and empty promises. This system, according to some, tries to divert people from their values, from the things that really matter, offering in exchange a false sense of security and power. It's the idea that, by blindly following what's popular, trendy, or convenient, we end up moving away from what truly defines us. In a world so dominated by external influences, how many of us have not asked ourselves whether we are truly making free choices, or whether we are led, without realizing it, onto an already marked path? Thus, the figure of the beast transcends any single interpretation. It is, at the same time, a symbol of something external and a representation of internal struggles. We are dealing with a curiosity in history that not only touches the physical world, but also reaches the psychological and spiritual. Each time we turn our attention to this enigmatic figure, we discover one more detail, one more piece that leads us to question how much we really know about the power, influence, and manipulation in our reality. And, with this reflection, we continue our journey, seeking to discover whether this beast is already among us, or whether it is yet to come. Throughout history, many biblical prophecies have been seen as signs, warnings that the end times are approaching. With each landmark event, be it a conflict, a disaster, or a global change, interpretations arise that these events are the fulfillment of ancient predictions. It is not surprising that, faced with the crises and imbalances of the present, so many turn their gaze to the apocalypse, trying to understand whether we are, in fact, living in the last days. Imagine the anguish and anticipation of living with the suspicion that everything around us is about to disintegrate. Are the signs already there, just waiting for someone to interpret them correctly? But how to distinguish a real signal from a simple coincidence? After all, dramatic events have always occurred over the centuries. Earthquakes, epidemics, and wars have become, for many, parts of the curiosity of human history. For some, these events are cyclical in nature, but for others, each event moves closer to the fulfillment of a prophecy. There are many scholars and spiritual leaders who point to the signs as clear indications that the apocalypse is underway. These prophecies, when studied in detail, seem to paint a frighteningly close portrait of the reality we live in. The delicate point is that in times of crisis, interpretations of signs intensify. Fear often fuels the belief that the end is near. Some believe that the recent pandemic, political instability, and global warming are the final warnings that humanity is about to meet its end. Others, however, claim that these interpretations may be exaggerated, the result of an anxious search for answers in moments of uncertainty. Perhaps, as we analyze each prophecy, we are led to question what really defines the end times and how much our perception of the future is shaped by the present. Thus, the line between what is prophetic and what is just a historical fact becomes increasingly blurred. While some see current events as a preparation for the apocalypse, others see them as just another chapter in humanity's natural and social changes. But, deep down, everyone shares the same concern. Are we close to the end or not? And as we explore this question, we delve deeper into one of history's greatest curiosities, trying to understand the signs of our time. We will move forward as the journey to unravel these prophecies has just begun. The distinction between sign and mark may seem subtle, but in biblical language, it carries significant weight. A sign points to something. It is a warning, a reminder that something greater is coming. The brand, in turn, is something definitive, a kind of seal, an impression that carries a deeper meaning. In the Bible, we see the brand as something that seals destiny, that defines a person's loyalty and identity. The signal is often temporary and can be seen and understood in different ways. The brand, however, represents a definitive and eternal choice. Thus, by differentiating a sign from a brand, we open a door to understanding the nature of this much-feared symbol. The brand, in the context of the mark of the beast, is presented as a unique, definitive symbol, a choice that does not allow for setbacks. It affects the identity of those who receive it, a marker that separates those who have it from those who refuse it. Think, for example, about how covenants and oaths work in our society. Once sealed, these commitments become part of who we are, something that defines us to the world. In the same way, the brand would be a seal that divides those who are part of a specific group from those who do not align with it, a trait that defines, once and for all, who each one belongs to. On the other hand, signs are like arrows on the path, warnings that appear to warn, guide, and, in many cases, to give a chance to change route. They are the storms and earthquakes, the words of the prophets, and even the curiosities of history that, in some way, lead and awaken attention to what is not yet definitive. These signs are opportunities for reflection, to evaluate the direction we are taking. However, once the mark is received, there is no longer any possibility of return. It is as if the time for interpretations and adjustments is over, and the person is irreversibly marked. So, as we continue exploring the meaning of this brand, it becomes essential to understand that, for those who believe, it is not just a symbol, but an eternal commitment. And by distinguishing sign and mark, we realize that, in the context of Revelation, we are dealing with a choice that transcends simple understanding. What comes next is even deeper, as it connects directly with the concept of free will and the human ability to decide one's own path. Are we ready to understand what this choice represents? The issue of free will is deeply intertwined with the mystery of the mark of the beast, as it leads us to reflect on freedom of choice in the face of something that seems inevitable. Since biblical times, the concept of choice has been present in sacred stories, as if life were a path in which each step depends on our decision. But what about when the choice involves an eternal risk, such as acceptance or rejection of the brand? This dilemma makes many wonder if we will truly have the freedom to choose, or if we will be forced into something that defies our own will. This is the first point that leads to understanding that the brand may not be a simple imposition. The Bible talks a lot about the power of free will, the ability to choose between light and darkness, right and wrong. For many, accepting or refusing the mark of the beast would be a reflection of this same principle. In a world where so many values and ideals are imposed, those who truly exercise free will are those who question, who look beyond appearances. This power of choice, however, brings with it a gigantic responsibility. Imagine a society where choices are constantly manipulated. Each step needs to be rethought. Each decision weighs as if it were a test of character. Choosing the brand, however, would be more than a simple decision. It would be an act of loyalty. In the biblical view, free will is not just about following a path, but about aligning with what is considered right, embracing the values that define who we are. When talking about the brand, many believe that free will allows them to reject this seal, preserving loyalty to something greater. This is the real challenge, using free will to stand firm in the face of the temptations and pressures that society imposes, refusing to give in to what seems inevitable. The power to choose remains one of humanity's greatest gifts, which is why, in the face of the brand, free will becomes even more relevant. For every choice, there is an impact, a consequence that goes beyond the immediate. This freedom to decide, however, also paves the way for the next point. To what extent would our society be willing to cede control and allow a brand like this to regulate our lives? Let's move forward and understand how this brand relates to the control of society and the way decisions are shaped throughout history. The idea that the mark of the beast could be used to control society is one of the darker aspects of this prophecy. Imagine living in a world where, to buy, sell, or work, everyone must have a brand that identifies and tracks every movement, every choice. It is not difficult to draw a parallel with our reality, where technological advances now allow constant surveillance. This concept of control recalls stories of authoritarian regimes, where individual freedom is sacrificed in the name of a greater good, which is often nothing more than a mask for power interests. The brand, then, becomes a tool for shaping society. In such a scenario, those who choose not to receive the brand would be marginalized, deprived of basic resources, and even their own dignity. Imagine the dilemma of someone who needs to choose between accepting an imposition or facing social isolation. It is a choice that requires not only courage, but a deep understanding of one's values. The fear of losing access to essential needs is a powerful form of manipulation, and those who impose this brand play on this fear. History shows us how, at different times, similar forms of control were applied, whether through identification, surveillance, or restriction of rights. Current technologies, such as digital identification, tracking chips, and surveillance networks, bring this concept closer to our reality. While these advances have benefits, such as facilitating transactions and increasing security, they also raise concerns about privacy and freedom. How willing are we to sacrifice our privacy in exchange for convenience? And could these systems evolve into something similar to the mark of the beast, where only those within the system can enjoy their rights? The curiosities of history show us that these dilemmas are not new, but now, with technology, they seem to be closer than ever. Thus, when reflecting on social control through a brand, we are led to question how far the limit goes between security and freedom. This is the point at which the prophecy touches directly on the present, showing that what seemed like a distant vision of a prophet may be closer than we imagine. Let's move forward to understand how these ideas of control and branding connect to modern technologies and how they can transform our society in ways we may not even imagine. After all, are we more vulnerable to this control than we think? The advancement of modern technologies has brought us to a point where ideas once seen as science fiction, such as microchips and digital identification, have become an everyday reality. RFID, radio frequency identification devices, for example, are already widely used to track objects and even people. Some theorists claim that this technology could be the prelude to something bigger, a mark that everyone would bear, voluntarily or not. Imagine having all your personal information contained on a microchip under your skin, something so small and seemingly harmless, but which, in the wrong hands, could become a tool of absolute control. Are we approaching an era where everyone will be monitored? For many, these innovations make everyday life easier, as they allow for quick transactions, access to restricted locations, and even immediate medical records. In some countries, people already accept chip implants in their hands to replace credit cards and keys. However, this convenience raises profound ethical and spiritual questions. To what extent are we willing to give up our privacy in exchange for practicality? The idea of carrying a mark that stores everything about us, health, finances, purchase history, is reminiscent of the mark of the beast itself, and this analogy fuels the fear that prophecies could be fulfilling before our eyes. The curiosity of history shows us that over the centuries, humanity has always sought ways to control and monitor. However, we have never had a technology as effective and comprehensive as digital identification. In addition to chips, we have algorithms that analyze every online movement, profiling behavior and preferences. This level of surveillance creates a complete map of who we are, And it's hard not to draw parallels to the brand prophecy, where everything we do would be overseen by a larger entity. Technology, in this context, becomes not just a tool, but a symbol of control. Given all this, we can only reflect on the future. Are we moving, little by little, towards a world where total control becomes inevitable? These questions lead us to consider the extent to which the brand is already among us, disguised as technological advances and modern conveniences. And so, we continue our exploration, seeking to understand whether these technologies are just a coincidence, or whether, in fact, they prepare the ground for the realization of the prophecies. Let's go ahead and look at the next point: how the apocalyptic account of the Apostle John laid the foundation for this current fear. The book of Revelation is one of the most enigmatic and frightening texts in the Bible, full of symbolism, creatures, and apocalyptic visions that transcend human understanding. The Mark of the Beast prophecy is just one of many dark images presented by John, a warning loaded with portent and mystery. Imagine the impact of this narrative on the first Christians, who, in the midst of persecution and uncertainty, found hope in the apostles' words, but also fear in the signs of the end. This is the power of words, to scare, inspire, and make you reflect on the meaning of each prophecy, as if they were the last instructions before a long and inevitable journey. To understand the weight of this prophecy, it is necessary to visualize the intensity with which John describes his visions. A book sealed with 7 seals, trumpets sounding and cups spilling out that symbolize God's wrath. The prophecy leaves no room for doubt about what he wanted to convey. A warning message for all times, an invitation to reflection and preparation. It is not just a report, it's a call to reevaluate our choices, and each symbol seems to carry a warning. It's as if John wanted every word to remain engraved in his mind and heart, making it clear that there is something bigger at stake. Throughout history, many people have tried to decipher the symbols of the apocalypse, seeking to understand what these elements represent. But the more you study, the more questions arise. The curiosity of the story leads us to see that the apocalypse is not just about the end. It's about the now, about what we are building and what we can avoid. Every seal, every trumpet, every mark seems to challenge us to rethink the way we live, as if there were a countdown in progress. Are these images just a metaphor? Or are they a faithful portrayal of something we still don't fully understand? Thus, the apocalypse involves us in an atmosphere of mystery and tension, a mixture of fear and fascination with the unknown. We are, after all, talking about a narrative that confronts our greatest fears and uncertainties, leading us to ponder what it really means to be at the end of times. This prophecy continues to echo, pushing those who study it to delve even deeper in search of answers. We will now move on to the next point, understanding the direct relationship between this mark and the act of worship, a crucial aspect to understand the magnitude of this prophecy. The connection between the mark of the beast and the act of worship is one of the most delicate points of this prophecy, as it involves a spiritual decision, a pact that goes beyond the physical. The Bible describes the mark not just as an external symbol, but as a sign of loyalty and submission to the beast, an act of surrender of one's soul. It is not a simple mark on the skin, but a profound acceptance of values that deviate from divine teachings. For many, accepting this mark would be a definitive break with their own spiritual essence, something that redefines the identity of those who receive it. Worship of the beast, as described in Revelation, represents a voluntary departure from the principles of goodness, justice, and humility. It is a decision to place yourself under a domain that promotes pride, greed, and selfishness. Think of moments in history when powerful figures demanded absolute submission, such as authoritarian rulers who positioned themselves above everyone and everything, demanding not just obedience but devotion. This power dynamic is not new. The curiosity of history shows us that humanity has already witnessed many examples of forced loyalty, a preview of what this relationship of worship with the beast would be like. The danger of this worship lies in the blindness it can cause. Those who worship the beast do not realize what they are missing, as they are seduced by empty promises of power and status. The brand, then, becomes a symbol of renunciation of what is true and pure, a choice that reflects an inversion of values. Just as we see in certain modern practices and ideologies, the risk of getting lost in deceptive ideals is constant. Every time you choose something that pleases the ego but moves away from the truth, it's like taking one more step towards that invisible but powerful mark. This relationship between brand and adoration leads us to an essential question. Where does our true loyalty lie? Could it be that, in a subtle way, we are already nurturing a devotion to something that goes against our deepest principles? This questioning is the key to understanding the depth of the Revelation's warning. And with this reflection, we move on to the next point, where the focus will be on the place where this mark should be received, the right hand and the forehead, and what this can symbolize in the journey of those who accept it. The choice of the right hand and forehead as locations for the mark of the beast is no coincidence. These points have a deep meaning, both spiritual and symbolic. The right hand, for example, is often associated with power, authority, and action in the world. Receiving the mark on this hand means, in a way, committing actions and decisions to an external power, letting it guide the steps and conduct. The forehead, in turn, represents the mind, thought, and consciousness. Marking the forehead symbolizes a surrender of reasoning, of principles, a surrender of one's own discernment. It is as if, by accepting this mark, the person surrenders their body and mind to the control of the beast. The choice of these places refers to a form of absolute control, where both doing and thinking are influenced. Imagine a life where even the simplest of gestures, like extending your hand, is no longer entirely yours. It's as if the brand imposed a new identity, a new way of seeing the world. In history, we have seen examples of regimes and ideologies that tried to dominate not only the body, but also the mind of individuals, encouraging the acceptance of a single thought. Every time we read about these periods, we realize how easy it is for human beings to fall into this trap, sacrificing individuality in exchange for acceptance and apparent security. The scriptures often speak of the importance of keeping one's mind and heart pure, of watching one's intentions and actions. Accepting a mark on the hand or forehead is, symbolically, the opposite of this. It is an act of giving up internal control, something that, for many, is the very essence of freedom. The curiosity of history teaches us that, over the centuries, symbols printed on our bodies, whether through brands, uniforms, or rituals, have always carried greater weight, representing alliances and commitments that remained visible to the world. The mark on his right hand and forehead goes beyond the physical. It is a representation that there is no room for another way of thinking or acting. This understanding of the hand and forehead reinforces the gravity of what the brand truly represents. It is not just a sign, but a change of identity, a profound transformation. When reflecting on this, it becomes clear what João wanted to convey, a warning for each person to maintain control over their mind and actions, without allowing external forces to dictate their destiny. And with this reflection, we move on to the next point, where we will explore how the saints, according to prophecy, face the mark and resist the temptation to surrender to this power. The prophecy of Revelation presents a figure that stands out amidst the chaos. The saints, those who, with unshakable faith, resist the temptation to accept the mark of the beast. For them, the brand represents a betrayal of sacred values, a surrender they are not willing to make. The saints are portrayed as individuals who, despite facing the difficulties of a controlled society, do not give up their principles. This resistance is not easy. It requires immense spiritual strength and a rare clarity of purpose. In a world where the brand symbolizes power and status, choosing not to receive it is an act of unusual courage, a choice that challenges survival itself. Throughout history, many individuals have been considered saints for refusing to give in to the oppressive powers of their day. Let us think, for example, of figures like Daniel, who in his time resisted the king's orders and preferred the lion's den to disobeying his values. This attitude of resistance is not just a curiosity of history, it is a demonstration that there have always been those who have placed their faith and integrity above any promise of security or advantage. These saints of the apocalypse are, therefore, a reflection of all those figures who, over the centuries, faced darkness with the light of their faith. For the saints, resisting the brand is more than a matter of loyalty. It is a way of preserving the essence of who they are. Refusing the brand is, symbolically, affirming your true identity and remaining faithful to what you believe to be eternal and immutable. In a world where everything is ephemeral and subject to change, this resistance becomes a living testimony to the faith that remains intact, even under pressure. It's not just a personal choice, it is an example for all those who still wonder to what extent they should compromise their values. And it is exactly this courage that distinguishes and elevates them. This resilience of the saints is a powerful reminder of the importance of remaining firm in your convictions, even when everything around you seems to be falling apart. As we progress, we see how this refusal to accept the mark brings severe consequences, but also promises of eternal rewards. Let's now explore what's in store for those who resist, and the consequences faced by those who choose the opposite path. After all, what does suffer eternally really mean in the language of Revelation? Accepting the mark of the beast, according to the prophecy of Revelation, is not a decision without consequences. Those who receive it commit themselves to a destiny that goes beyond earthly life, a destiny of eternal suffering. For many, this punishment represents a complete separation from what is divine and sacred, a separation that can never be reversed. Imagine a place where peace and hope do not exist, where all that remains is emptiness and regret. This idea of eternal suffering is not only physical, but also spiritual, an echo that reverberates in the depths of the being, where purposelessness and anguish are constant. Throughout history, different religious traditions have brought stories of eternal punishments and retributions, each presenting their own vision of what happens to those who stray from the sacred path. In the biblical context, the concept of eternal punishment is often described with strong images such as fire and darkness, elements that symbolize both physical punishment and spiritual loneliness. The curiosity of history shows us that this idea of punishment has always been present in civilizations, serving as a reminder of the consequences that accompany our choices. And in accepting the mark, what is lost is not just a divine blessing, but the chance for reconciliation itself. The severity of this punishment is a warning for each person to deeply consider their choices. Those who accept the mark seek an immediate advantage, a comfortable life, free from restrictions, but they pay the highest price. In a world where the truth is often disguised, the apocalypse invites us to reflect on what is really worth it, giving in to what is easy and convenient, or preserving what is eternal. This decision, in essence, is a test of character, a way of showing the world, and yourself, where your true loyalty lies. By understanding this consequence, we realize that the apocalypse does not just speak of punishment, but of a choice between light and darkness, between fidelity and betrayal. It's a decision that requires sacrifice, but also promises rewards for those who resist. And it is exactly this promise that leads us to the next point, where we will explore the role of the Mark of the Beast within theories about the New World Order. To what extent do these forces act to control our reality and dictate the future? The relationship between the Mark of the Beast and the New World Order is one of the theories that arouses the most debate and suspicion in our day. For many, the idea of a New World Order represents a global system of control, where powerful elites determine the course of humanity, limiting freedoms and imposing ideologies. This theory suggests that the brand is not just a spiritual symbol, but a submission mechanism that divides those who are part of the system from those who resist. Imagine a world where every decision, from what we buy to what we believe, is shaped and watched by forces that operate in the shadows. This absolute control is not something new. It is a curiosity in history that always reappears, like a constant attempt at unlimited power. Many believe that the concept of the New World Order is already in action, manifesting itself through global agreements, economic restrictions, and technological advances that facilitate surveillance. In this context, the Mark of the Beast would be an extension of this control, a way of identifying and punishing those who do not fit the system's rules. Over the centuries, we've seen empires, governments, and secret societies attempt to create a unified order. But now, with technology, that vision seems closer than ever. The brand would then be the definitive seal of this system, a sign of who submits and who is excluded. Proponents of this theory point to recent events, such as the complete digitization of transactions and advances in artificial intelligence, as signs that we are being prepared for this future. A world where everyone is connected and tracked would facilitate control over every aspect of life, eliminating any room for anonymity or individual freedom. In a scenario like this, refusing the brand could mean social exclusion, a high cost for those who want to preserve their independence. Could it be that, by accepting certain changes as normal, we are paving the way for something much bigger, a new form of control where the brand is the access key? This idea of the New World Order leads us to a deep reflection on the role we play as individuals. To what extent are we willing to give up control over our lives in exchange for convenience and security? As we continue to explore this issue, we will see how the brand can be used as a tool for persecution, a means of identifying and controlling those who oppose this system. The next point is crucial, as it will show us how this brand becomes a real threat to freedom of expression and the faith of those who choose the path of resistance. The idea that the Mark of the Beast could be used as a tool of religious persecution is one of the darkest implications of this prophecy. Throughout history, control and manipulation have been intertwined with the desire to impose beliefs and silence those who refuse to compromise. Imagine a world where people who refuse the brand are seen as enemies of the system, targets of discredit and punishment. These people would be forced to the margins of society, isolated, unable to carry out even the most basic tasks, such as buying food or working. It is a scenario where the right to freedom of belief is denied, and the brand becomes a symbol of subjugation. Religious persecution is not new. The curiosity of history shows us countless episodes where faith was a reason for censorship and repression. In the times of ancient Rome, for example, Christians were forced to renounce their faith and worship the emperor at the risk of death. Likewise, the brand could function as a differentiation system, separating those who are willing to adapt from the rest who insist on maintaining their spiritual freedom. This mark would not just be a physical seal, but a test of loyalty, and the price to pay for resistance would be high. For those who refuse the mark, this persecution is an invitation to spiritual strength, proof that faith goes beyond convenience and social acceptance. They would be individuals who, even in the face of extreme adversity, choose to follow their convictions. In this context, the brand acts as a filter, revealing those who are truly willing to sacrifice comfort and even safety to remain faithful to their own principles. This act of resistance is not just personal. It becomes a symbol of courage and loyalty, a testimony to the strength that faith can have in someone's life. Seeing this imminent persecution, it is clear that the brand does not just represent a spiritual issue, but also a social and ethical challenge. It puts everyone in front of a choice: give in and adapt, or resist and face the consequences. And with that, we continue on our journey to understand how brand fear affects the human mind. Let's explore the psychology behind this fear, understanding how the idea of a brand affects emotions, shaping attitudes and behaviors in our society. Fear of the mark of the beast generates a feeling of paranoia that transcends the barriers of faith, affecting even those who do not have a deep connection with the subject. This fear is fueled by the possibility that a simple decision could define eternal destiny, a choice that admits no regrets. The idea of carrying a sign that condemns one to eternal suffering, added to the possibility of losing one's freedom, is enough to affect one's mind. In a world where life or death decisions are rarely so direct, the brand appears as a kind of advanced sentence, provoking reflections and insecurities that intensify over time. This fear, however, is not an isolated phenomenon. The curiosity of history shows us that, in periods of great change, human beings tend to seek supernatural explanations for the chaos around them. In economic crises, pandemics, and even wars, rumors arise that the end times are approaching. This cycle repeats itself, as fear of the brand is, in essence, the fear of losing control over one's destiny. It's as if there was an internal alarm that activates, leading people to view each event with suspicion, looking for signs and connections with the prophecies. Paranoia around the brand affects behaviors and decisions, creating a constant sense of vigilance. People avoid certain technologies, products, and even symbols that may remotely resemble the brand's concept, such as barcodes and digital IDs. It is a state of alert that changes routine and choices, revealing how much this fear infiltrates everyday life. The brand, then, stops being just a distant concept and becomes an invisible presence, controlling the perception and feelings of those who allow themselves to be influenced by this belief. This fear also generates a feeling of isolation. Paranoia, while uniting groups that share the same distrust, creates a distance from the rest of the world, generating a climate of mutual distrust. Understanding the depth of this fear and the psychological impact of the brand, we move on to explore the signs of nature. Earthquakes, epidemics, and disasters that prophecies say serve as warnings for the end times. These natural events further fuel anxiety, as if they were constant reminders that the end is approaching. Signs in nature have always been interpreted as omens of end times, especially in moments where humanity finds itself faced with disasters that defy understanding. Earthquakes, epidemics, and other calamities, for many, are manifestations of divine discontent, warnings that something greater is coming. Imagine the feeling of fragility when realizing that, in a matter of seconds, nature can transform everything around us. These events remind us that no matter how far humanity advances, there is a force beyond our control, something that can take us out of our comfort zone and make us question the direction we are taking. In history, these phenomena were seen as proof that the prophecy of Revelation is gradually being fulfilled, a constant warning that the mark may be near. Epidemics, such as the Black Death in Europe, awoke a sense of imminent doom, and the same has happened in more recent pandemics. Each new natural disaster or health crisis is read as a possible sign, and many begin to reflect on what these events could mean. This is not just a curiosity of history. It is a way of interpreting the unknown, as if nature speaks to us in a dark and silent way. These signs awaken a series of emotions, from fear to the need to seek explanations. For many, earthquakes and epidemics are invitations to review spirituality, the connection with what is divine. In moments like these, people turn to faith, looking for comfort and answers. After all, if these signs indicate something bigger, perhaps it is time to seek an internal transformation. Natural disasters remind us that everything is temporary, that stability and security can disappear from one day to the next, leading us to question our spiritual and emotional preparation for what is to come. These natural phenomena reinforce the idea that there is something more powerful beyond us, something that may be setting the stage for the prophecies to be fulfilled. And as we reflect on these signs, we move on to the next topic: how false prophecies and misinterpretations throughout history have confused and influenced generations. The mistakes of the past help us understand the present and prepare us for the uncertainties of the future. Let's explore these mistakes and their lessons, for each mistake also carries with it a truth that can help us see more clearly. Throughout history, false prophecies about the end of the world have frequently emerged, fueled by misinterpretations and the desire to decipher the unknown. Since ancient times, there have been religious leaders and visionaries who claim to know the exact moment of the end times, leading multitudes to prepare for what they considered inevitable. These predictions, which were never fulfilled, reveal a curiosity in human history, the constant search for answers to what is beyond understanding. These false prophecies not only deceived, but also left deep marks on entire communities who needed to rebuild their beliefs and reevaluate what they considered to be true. Each new failed prediction reinforced distrust and skepticism toward prophecies. Religious movements that predicted the end and saw their dates pass without anything happening experienced profound disappointments. These experiences showed the danger of hasty interpretations and the force that a false prophecy can have on people's lives. It is as if each generation tries to find the meaning of revelation in contemporary events, but history reminds us that many of these attempts end up distorting the original message. The fear of the end, combined with the desire to understand the future, often leads to mistakes that cost many people their faith and peace. These misinterpreted prophecies also generated significant social and psychological impacts. Communities that believed the end was imminent abandoned their properties, broke ties, and, in some cases, isolated themselves from the rest of society. The consequences of such decisions are living proof of the power that the fear of the apocalypse exerts over the human mind. These mistakes, instead of bringing peace, generated anxiety, doubts, and, eventually, a feeling of deception. Each error over the centuries teaches us the importance of approaching prophecies with caution and discernment, as superficial understanding can lead to extreme reactions. In the face of so many false predictions, we are left with the lesson that knowledge about the apocalypse requires balance, reflection, and humility. When studying prophecies, we are invited to look carefully, avoiding hasty conclusions that can divert us from the true meaning. Now, we begin to observe how other religions and philosophies see the mark and the end of times, expanding our understanding of a topic that crosses not only Christianity, but also various traditions around the world. After all, how do different cultures interpret the brand, and what can this teach us about our own understanding? The mark of the beast, although central to Christian prophecy, arouses interest and interpretations in various religions and philosophies around the world. Each tradition brings its own vision about signs of an end, corruption, or judgment that awaits humanity. In Islam, for example, there is a belief in an end of times and in marks that would emerge as identification of believers and non-believers, separating those who align themselves with the truth from those who choose the opposite path. These perspectives, interestingly, share the idea that the brand is a symbol of loyalty and obedience. a seal that defines where each person's heart really lies. For some Eastern traditions, such as Hinduism and Buddhism, although there is no identical brand concept, there is the idea of a cycle of destruction and rebirth. In certain interpretations, the mark represents the influence of materialism and ego, which trap the soul in a state of illusion. For them, the end of times is more about spiritual transformation, an opportunity to break the ties that bind us to suffering and ignorance. The concept of brand, then, is seen as the weight of choices that keep humanity far from truth and enlightenment, being an obstacle to be overcome. In Judaism, some prophecies talk about signs that will indicate the arrival of a time of judgment and redemption, where those who remain faithful to God's teachings will be rewarded. This vision emphasizes the idea of loyalty and perseverance, themes that resonate with the Christian concept of the brand as a test of loyalty. However, the focus here is more on deeds and righteous living than an external symbol. For them, the brand can be understood as a reflection of the daily actions and decisions that define who they are and what purpose they serve. These different perspectives on the mark and the end of times reveal a curiosity in the history of beliefs, the universal search for meaning, for a greater truth that guides the life and destiny of humanity. Each tradition, in its own way, invites us to reflect on the impact of our choices and the weight they will have on the future. With this expanded view, we move on to the next point, where we will explore the promises of hope and salvation that the Bible offers to those who resist and maintain faith in the face of trials. After all, what is the destiny reserved for those who choose the path of loyalty? Given everything we've explored about the mark of the beast, signs, prophecies, and promises of salvation, one question stands out. Are you ready to choose the path of true loyalty? Life offers us decisions every day, but some choices are definitive, like accepting Jesus. It represents the promise of hope and redemption, peace in the midst of chaos, and refuge from the uncertainties of the future. The world around may seem dark, but Jesus is the light that never goes out, the path that leads to true life. Choosing Jesus is more than accepting a belief. It is embracing a new identity, a new life that does not surrender to the pressures of the world. And this isn't just about the future. It is a decision that transforms the present, that strengthens the soul, and gives meaning to the journey. Accepting Jesus means living with purpose, knowing that, in the midst of all the storms, there is an anchor that supports and protects. Maybe you've felt this call before. Maybe you've questioned the meaning of everything. And today, the answer is within reach. Jesus is waiting to welcome you, to transform your life and give you a peace that the world cannot offer. So I invite you, here and now, to open your heart to Jesus, to recognize that amid all of life's mysteries and challenges, He is the only safe path. If this message touched your heart, allow yourself to take this step, accept Jesus as your Savior. And to continue learning and growing on this path, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and together, let's explore history, faith, and everything that brings us closer to truth and light.
If you're interested in having a Bible like the one we use in our studies, check out the link in the first pinned comment. If you enjoy our content and can support our channel, consider buying us a coffee through Buy Me a Coffee. Additionally, if you can purchase a crucifix, we also have a link in the first pinned comment. We greatly appreciate your support. God bless and see you in the next video.